Welcome to TradeTheNBA.com. This is John. This reports for the 23rd, and well, this felt like a day of yesteryear back when the market actually performed like it used to. Well, we had the magenta moving below yellow and the rising white, and of course it crossed above the red as well. And we had a little divergence here of the green DOC above the red as well as cyan under red. My suggestion was that the worst case scenario, you probably end up moving towards the ABM yellow, which is currently exactly what the market is doing. And problem being, again, when we talked about it, was the fact that you had matching highs or even higher highs on lower shakeout readings, and it's only going to take one lower shakeout histogram to really flip that around. Plus, we've been operating in some positive extremes, well, going all the way back right about here, which would be around 46.13, which from where we were at 47.40, quite a ways still to go, just to fill the positive extremes back in. We had a partial attempt at it from the previous one, but and this is still not horribly bearish in any way, shape, or form. I mean, not great with the magenta dipping in that, but we would expect to see a fall off of DOC red as well as DOC cyan moving above the red. Turn to the YM, still been weaker, obviously. Already had the white over magenta, which definitely bearish and falling shakeout from that standpoint. Been pretty consistent. And the NASDAQ had been stronger, but it crossed over below as well as the white MBI coming above. So that kind of gave that transition, particularly to, I always talk about this one where you get the steel crossing below cyan, even if it's below red, tends to be problematic. So we'll see if we start to get a rollover. This is quite interesting to go from such a huge positive day to finishing negative. Of course, the euro, not even worth mentioning because it's doing exactly what we expect. It's just been a nightmare scenario that MBI red leading it. Even when that pivots, it's going to lead to even further dip. So could be looking at a sub-10 situation. Gold taking a bit of a beating on lowered expectations for inflation, with oil not really doing a whole lot recently, even though it's not going to change whether inflation has been built into things from before. But the expectation is that rising COVID, things like that, would slow economic growth, which will put a damper on inflationary needs. Though Treasury's coming back just a little bit yield-wise. So again, if that continues to dip and we get towards that 141 for there, then I think you would expect to see a lot more market decline, because that will entice people to go to safety versus more risk in equities, and that's a big one. There's oil having dipped to the 50% mark. We'll see if that captures anything at this particular point, still in a negative basis point, but a little bit of a turnaround with the steel crossing above the orange, but you have to see a turnaround in magenta. That should lead to at least an improvement from DOC green, midterm buyers coming back into it more below the red line, meaning those likely to get retraced. I thought I'd throw this one in here. Ethereum. This from a 5K chart. Beautiful signaling from it. Very effective from these intraday setups. It gets a bit more volume than Bitcoin does, broadly speaking. I mean, it's pretty decent. They're 95K range. But this was a clean short and did exactly as expected, which makes them effective for trading purposes, without question. Looking at Bitcoin, like I said, a little bit of a pop early on, some excitement off the oversold, but then it started to retrace that. It was all on positive extreme as well, so expect this. So it took the short just slightly before there, and nice yield. Now remember, even though we talked about the idea of going back to these lows here, the further low below here is 51 that we talked about on the daily chart. So that could create a lot of panic from some in the crypto world from a 50K standpoint. Had the nice pop on the SP and the GAM setup, but ends up with slightly below break even on that, and then took the short. Took some heat on the short before it started to move to the downside. So that will be a nice potential profit for that setup. And then from a 5K, oh, look at this. We don't see the beginning of the day on the chart for the first time in quite some. That's been days at least since we've, or weeks almost, it seems, since we've had more than just a single chart with the entire day in it. But it started off with the slight pump, and then it just caught fire, cyan under red for most of that, and as it started to peak out, we ended up with a pretty clean DOC spread right at the end of it, even if you didn't want to take it because of the green dot buy set up the next bar was relatively identical within that, and then of course the deep red even took place and faded down there. We ended up with the cross of steel above orange, which to me usually is a little warning that you're at the end of a fade, and that's what kind of led to a softness. But immediately after that, we got a spike of red, and it's interesting because it's exactly what happened at the end of the day, ironically. And then once the cascade started, red led the whole way, so we were expecting a little bit more softness coming back, and so even when there was a pop, it came right back. So it didn't break down further, which would have been the suggestion below 50%. I was expecting the lows with NBI white writing above, and then NBI spiked again, but you get an immediate pop-up of magenta, which caused what seemed like a boring uptick, and just as we were starting to get to the peak, boom. So that became an exciting short, and again, it was right about this point where that crossed over, and then I was like happy to be clear of that setup at that particular point, even though we were still in a pretty decent decline. But then as soon as that started, we started to get a decay of the magenta again, and white spiking back up, and took that opportunity, and then boom, red shot up, and so that was an easy one to just stick with it, and pretty much broke below all the positive extreme levels going through there. So you had a day that went from plus 40 back down to minus 10 to back up to plus 30 something to negative, well, now negative 15, but it closed a little lower than that. So that's some really nice volatility, and this is what happens when the B team takes over for holiday trading. Kind of an exciting setup, more activity than we've seen in a while, which is fun, especially when we're just clear with what is about to happen with it. So all in all, good stuff. As always though, I'll keep updating on the Skype chat, and trade well.